My daughter's mother and I split up when she was 6 years old, and because of some problems that her mother was having, we decided that it would be best if she lived with me. My grandpa had left my dad his old house in his will, and my dad had fixed it up with the intent to sell it. But with the situation, we decided that I would move in and rent the house from him. The house was perfect for myself and Ellie. It was a small, 2-bedroom house, and it was out of the way from everything. The only downside was that the bedrooms didn't have closets, but we didn't have a whole lot, so I knew we could make it work. After our first night of staying in the house, Ellie came to me and said that someone was in her room. I can't remember the exact conversation, but I basically told her that she was just imagining things, because it was a new, maybe somewhat scary environment. That night I walked her around the house showing her that everything was locked up. I took her into her bedroom and looked under her bed with her, checked her window and looked behind every nook and cranny basically. She was convinced that there was no way that anyone could get in to do her any harm. I told her that I wouldn't let anyone hurt her, and I was able to get her to go to bed. The next morning, Ellie again complained that there was someone in her room and she didn't want to stay in the house anymore. She wanted to go live with Grandma and Grandpa. I had never seen her so upset. I told her that I would sleep in her room to prove that there was nothing to be scared of. I brought my blankets and pillows into Ellie's room and made myself a comfy spot beside her bed. We both said our goodnights, and it didn't take long for me to fall asleep. I'm not sure what time it was, but I woke up to the sound of metal softly clanging together. It took me a minute to focus my eyes, and the first thing that I noticed was that Ellie had left her bed and had snuggled up with me on the floor. I was thinking that I had imagined the noise at first, but then I heard it again. Ellie's nightlight was on, so there was a soft orange glow illuminating the room, so I could make out the things in the room pretty well, but I saw nothing out of the ordinary. I had mentioned that there were no closets in the room, so I bought some portable clothes racks for both rooms to hang our clothes on. Her hanging clothes were the first thing that I noticed moving. The clanging was the sound of the hangers hitting each other and sliding on the rack. Then the clothes parted, and a shadowy figure of someone or something's head appeared in the gap of the clothes. I was paralyzed. I wanted to grab Ellie and run as fast as I could, but I couldn't do anything. My body wouldn't allow me to do so. The only thing I could do was keep my eyes fixated on whatever was staring at me and my daughter. "What is that, Daddy?" A tiny whisper came from beside me. "Shh," was the only thing that I managed to get out. I can't tell you how long I laid there staring at whatever it was, but it felt like an eternity. Eventually, this thing backed away, disappeared, whatever you want to say it did. It didn't matter to me. It was gone and so were we. I took Ellie out of the room and put her in my bed, and I didn't sleep a wink the rest of the night. The next day, I gave her what she wanted. We both moved in with my parents until I was able to get us a place of our own. This was a little over 4 years ago, and I still get goosebumps if Ellie brings it up, or even just now while writing this. I've never been that scared in my life, and I doubt and hope that I ever will be again. When I was in my early 20s, I was married with 2 small children. The 4 of us, myself, my husband, my 2-year-old daughter, and our newborn son. We were living in an old house that had been converted into apartments. I know that the house was built sometime in the 1920s or 30s, but despite my best efforts, I was never able to find out anything more about its history. We moved into the apartment unit on the left side of the ground floor, and we had a young male college student that lived above us. The apartment to the right of us was being renovated, so it was empty at the time. We didn't notice anything weird about the place right away. The first odd thing that I remember happening was that the toilet paper holder in the bathroom had a tendency to turn on its own, faster and faster, until the entire roll of toilet paper had unraveled and it was laying in a pile on the bathroom floor. It only ever happened when one of the two of us was around to witness it. This was frustrating, but we didn't attribute it to anything paranormal at first. My husband explained it away as a defective toilet paper holder, but when we replaced it with a new one, it continued. He had run out of explanations. Around the same time, my husband and I would be awakened late at night by the sound of children laughing, shrieking, and stomping on the floor of the apartment above us. We thought this was strange since the college student who lived there didn't have children. We eventually concluded that a girlfriend or relative of his must have moved in, along with her children. After a couple of weeks of being awakened by these brats at all hours of the night, my husband wanted to have a conversation with the neighbor about keeping the kids quiet, but when he knocked on his door the next afternoon, nobody answered. The next day, about a week later, when he finally did spot the neighbor outside getting his mail, my husband approached him. He explained the situation and politely asked if the guy could maybe put his kids to bed at a reasonable hour because they were keeping us up at night. The guy stares at him like he's crazy. He says he doesn't have any kids. My husband thinks he's just saying it isn't his problem, so he starts to get angry and tells the guy to tell his girlfriend or his sister or whoever is living in the apartment with him to keep their kids quiet then. The guy suddenly looks very alarmed. "There's nobody living here but me," he says, "and I haven't been here for the last month. I just got out of jail for a probation violation." Well, that kind of freaked us out. It must have freaked the neighbor out worse, because he packed up and moved out a few days later. We stayed, and things got increasingly weirder. It seemed like whatever it was thrived on attention and was rather mischievous. Objects began disappearing and reappearing in odd places. This happened so often that eventually it didn't even freak me out anymore. It just annoyed me. When I lost my temper and yelled at whatever it was to give me the thing back, it would take longer for it to show up again. I learned that the best way to deal with it was to simply ignore it when it happened, and the thing would eventually reappear, sometimes right where it had vanished. We came to accept that we shared our apartment with at least one entity, but it was childlike and we did not perceive it as threatening. Over time, another entity started to make itself known. This one was not friendly, and it gave me a very bad feeling. The first time I encountered this being, I was laying on the bed that I shared with my husband with my back to the doorway. My husband and I had been arguing in the kitchen, and he had stormed out of the kitchen and through the back door. I assumed he was going for a drive to blow off steam, so I let him go and stormed off to the bedroom. I was laying on the bed, staring at the wall when I heard the back door open. I heard footsteps in the kitchen, heading for our bedroom. I assumed it was my husband coming back to tell me sorry. The footsteps paused for a moment at the doorway of our bedroom, then I heard them shuffling across the carpeted floor of our bedroom and over to the bed. Someone sat on the bed next to me. I waited for my husband to speak, but he said nothing. I finally grew irritated with his silence and rolled over to see what his problem was. There was no one there. My husband returned almost an hour later. He had taken that drive after all. The second and last time I encountered this entity, I was once again in our bedroom. It was well past midnight. The children were asleep in their beds, and I was settling into mine. My husband wanted to stay up for a while and play video games, so he was in the living room. I just turned off my bedside lamp and was laying with my eyes closed, loving the silence, when I heard footsteps in the kitchen. Once again, the footsteps stopped at the door of my bedroom, which was standing open. "Hey, Tara," I heard my husband whisper from the doorway. I did not open my eyes. I remember feeling annoyed because I had just been drifting off to sleep. "What?" I snapped. No answer. I opened my eyes. There was a tall, black shape standing in the doorway of my bedroom. It was not my husband. It was easily a foot taller, and I couldn't see its face. As soon as I laid eyes on it, the hair on my arm stood up. I knew this thing was bad news. I could feel it. "What do you want?" I managed to say. It didn't say anything. I couldn't see its eyes, but I could feel it looking at me. It appeared to be growing darker and more solid the longer I looked at it. That moment seemed to stretch on to forever. When I finally could stand it no longer, I shouted, "Go away!" and dove under the covers like a little kid. I don't know how long I huddled under the blankets, but I eventually felt the horrible knot in my stomach loosen, and I somehow knew that it was gone. I sat up, pushed the blankets off me, and looked around. The black shape was gone. I jumped out of bed, strode through the kitchen, and ran into the living room where my husband was busy playing an old NES game. He took one look at my face and wanted to know what was wrong. "Did you just stand in the doorway of our bedroom and whisper my name?" I demanded. "No," he said. "I've been in here the whole time." This was the last straw. I started looking for a new apartment the next day. We moved out a couple of weeks later. Later on, some friends of ours moved into the same apartment. They too heard the laughing children on the second floor, but fortunately never encountered the shadowy entity. The thing that freaks me out the most about the whole thing was that it spoke to me in my husband's voice. It sounded so much like him. I didn't question that it was him until I opened my eyes. I sometimes wonder, if I hadn't opened my eyes, what would it have said to me? I don't like to think about that. This happened years ago when I was attending art school in Denver, Colorado, around 2008. I had just broken up with my current boyfriend and had gotten involved with a guy, George, from one of my classes. The first time I visited his apartment, literally right across the street from school, was where I had one of the most vivid paranormal experiences I've ever had to this day. When you wanted to visit George's apartment building, you had to check in with the apartment manager, whose office was directly to the right when you walked in. I gave him my ID, and he wrote my name down. I then asked him where George's apartment was, and he told me just go up the stairs and it will be the second to last door on the right. I stopped a few feet after I reached the top of the stairs, looked down the hall, and saw George's door. I was about to start walking towards it when I saw a young woman, about my age or maybe a few years older, come out of the door directly across from George's door and start walking towards his door. It seemed like everything went in slow motion for the next minute or two. She was slim and tall, extremely pale, with long straight brown hair. She was wearing what looked like an outfit to go work out or jog in, a white hoodie, some baggy workout shorts, and running shoes. Midway through her walking to George's door, she looked at me with a very expressionless face. It gave me the chills, even though I didn't understand why. Then she looked back towards George's door, opened it, and went in. It was weird because it was very quiet the whole time. The door didn't make any sounds when opening and closing. At that point I was angry because I didn't know who this girl was or why she was going into George's apartment. I went over to his door hurriedly, knocked, and he opened it with a warm smile, asking to come in and to not mind the mess. He had a super tiny studio apartment with a giant closet and a little bathroom. I talked with him for a while and then asked him about the girl, and jokingly asked him if she was hiding in what I thought was his bedroom. He looked a little confused and proceeded to open the giant closet door, and there was just a few boxes and some clothes hanging up. He asked me again about the girl and what she looked like, so I described her. He started telling me this story about how the apartment building was really terrible before the current manager had bought it. He said there was a lot of drug deals and a few murders that had happened in the building. There was even someone who had been thrown out of a window. He then told me that the other tenants had seen some weird stuff around the building, mainly in the creepy basement where all of the washers and dryers are, and a select few tenants had actually seen a girl, like the one I had described. It was just so strange, because when I saw the girl, she looked real, even though her paleness was incredibly creepy. I have had other paranormal experiences since I was younger, but none like this. Has anyone else had an experience like this? In my junior year of college, I was moving out of a fraternity house because it was too wild, and I needed to focus more on my studies. After having two horrible roommates, one a psychopath and one an alcoholic that would frequently urinate himself, I decided to just fork over the extra money and live by myself. I found an apartment for dirt cheap, really late in the game of looking at apartments, as I am kind of a procrastinator. The landlord took me to see it, told me the previous occupants were a couple who signed a 12-month lease and then broke it about a month after moving in, but they were still living in the house. So we get there. The woman currently renting the apartment is in her car waiting for us when we get there, as if she just refuses to be inside the apartment. And when I see it from the inside, the apartment was completely empty. Obviously, the two were living somewhere else, waiting for somebody else to take this place off their hands. I didn't see it as unusual and gladly took the place. I move all of my stuff in, spend my first night alone in the apartment. Nothing too out of the ordinary happens. Periodically throughout the day, I hear what sounds like people walking into my back door. Not spooky, it sounded too real. I would often walk to meet the person walking into my apartment, as me and my friends are very casual and just walk into each other's places without knocking. I would hear someone walk in my kitchen, go see who it was, and find no one there. I wake up to hear various pots and pans fall off my kitchen table and hit the floor. I wake up to investigate, and everything that was on my kitchen table is now on the floor. Everything. As if someone just swiped everything with a single arm to the floor. I attribute it to the wind and go back to sleep. I have school. I get my bag and start walking out of my apartment when I hear my lamp in my living room hit the floor and break. I go inspect. The lamp has hit the floor and was broken, just like I heard, but the way it fell appears to be as if someone pushed from the wall. The lamp was directly in the corner, but has fallen in the opposite direction from the corner. No windows are open, and I have no explanation. On my way to school, I start to speculate that maybe something is weird with this place. I am cooking myself dinner in the kitchen when out of nowhere I hear various loud sounds all at once in my living room. I stop what I'm doing to investigate. Every single drawer of my coffee table and various end tables has opened on their own, simultaneously. It's enough to scare me this time, and I spend the rest of the night with a friend. Around this time is where the nightmares started. I had reoccurring dreams of a kid in my closet, crying. I always go see who's crying, and it's this kid. Not that much younger than me, about 20 years old, weeping. He calls himself Victor and says this used to be his bedroom. I ask if there's anything I could do to help him, and he begins to tell me, yes, there is. He tells me that he and I aren't that different. He tells me various things about my family that also happened to him, and that we could help each other get better. All I need to do is let him in. I'm not sure what he means by this, but repeats it over and over, that in order for me to help him and for him to help me, I have to let him in. I go on to have this dream every night until I move out. I'm officially scared. This is my worst nightmare. I haven't even been here in a week, and I'm losing it. I feel as if something is watching me everywhere I go. Whenever I leave my bedroom, something happens. Something gets tossed off a shelf. Something falls. A faucet turns on by itself. Like whatever this thing is just gets mad when I leave my bedroom. But I don't want to be in my bedroom, because that's where Victor is. The nightmares are getting worse and worse. I can't help but notice I'm starting to become very, very depressed. Something about being in this apartment sucks the life out of me. I feel as if I have no energy or will to do anything, and cry myself to sleep. I had no reason to be sad whatsoever. My life was great at this moment aside from the issues. I decide I have to power through this, as I signed a 12-month lease. I officially believe my apartment is haunted. I decide to address the thing, whatever it is. I say, "Look, I know there is something in here. That's fine. I have no problem with you being in my apartment, but you can't keep scaring me. I'm not going anywhere and you need to accept that. If you keep tormenting me, I'm going to get a priest in here to bless the house." I feel confident, as I've read somewhere that ghosts will actually back down if you show you aren't afraid of them. I am very, very wrong. I wake up to the sound of my smoke detector and the smell of burning paper. I run out to my kitchen to see a textbook of mine on my stove with all 4 burners going on high. I quickly grab it and throw it in the sink and turn the stove off. I am officially scared again, so I quickly grab some stuff and decide to run back to my friend's house. But as I get to the door, it slams shut in my face, like some cliche horror movie. I don't know why, but this doesn't even scare me. It makes me fucking furious. I start yelling and throwing around my kitchen furniture, screaming, "Fuck it. You want this place? You could fucking have it. I'm fucking leaving." I flip my kitchen table in a rage and force open the back door. I run out, leave my stuff, drink heavily with some friends. I call a moving truck. I call my landlord and tell him I'm breaking my lease and I fucking leave. I end up not being able to find another place in such a short time, and I have to miss school for the entire year. Well worth it. Whatever was in that apartment was fucked up, and I want no part of it. Now, I have no proof that what I experienced was truly supernatural. I usually try not to tell this story as a lot of people don't believe me, or attribute it to me being nervous about living on my own for the first time. Whatever was the case, I truly believed I was in danger. Whether it was true or not, I currently live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my girlfriend, and I couldn't be happier. This happened when I was about 13 or so. It was summertime and I was on vacation with my parents. We had hit the road and driven quite a ways to visit my older sister who lived across the country. After spending time together and sharing supper, we decided to call it a night. My parents slept in my sister's bedroom, and she slept in the neighboring room with her small son. It's important to note a few things at this point. My mother is a round, short woman with very delicate feminine features. She has round glasses, and that night went to bed in a long blue nightgown. My sister, on the other hand, is very tall and athletically built, taking after my dad in regards to her facial features. She too has glasses, but unlike my mother, hers were square-shaped. She went to bed in a shorter, orange and striped nightgown. These small but substantial differences are key. Now, since all of the bedrooms were full, I was given a blanket and pillow to sleep on the couch with. Of course, like any kid, I watched TV for a few hours well into the night. At around 4 a.m., it dawned on me that we had plans for the next day, so I should try and get some rest. After tossing and turning for about an hour or so, I gave up and just laid on my back staring at the stars visible from the nearby window. As the natural light flooded the room from the sun rising, I flipped through some photo albums. I did this for a while, not having slept at all the entire night. At this point, I was pretty bored and lonely, hoping someone would wake up soon and talk to me. At around 8 a.m., I heard a door slowly open and someone come out into the hallway. At my sister's house, the living room is sunken in and a small staircase of maybe 3 steps leads to the raised kitchen and dining room. The hallway is also in this raised area and connects to the bathroom and bedrooms. In the living room, there's a doorless archway that leads down to the basement and laundry room. This means that I could look up and see what was going on in the dining room from the couch. This person hummed a little, and then was caught off guard by a table in the dining room, full of framed pictures of my family my sister had on display. I don't know how to describe the way they looked at the photos, besides saying they were bewildered by them, maybe even enchanted, letting out an occasional "oh" and "ah." I could tell it was a woman, but I wasn't sure if it was my mother or sister. This was strange because, like I said, they looked alike but were also very distinguishable. I also felt this weird feeling because everyone in my family has seen these photos many times, and I'd even say that we had a few copies of the exact same photos at the house, so why act so amazed by them? I said, "Hey Ma, what are you doing?" in a nervous yet warm voice. No response. Okay then, it was my sister. "Hey, good morning, Sarah. What are you making your dear sibling for breakfast?" No response. Huh. I knew I was definitely loud enough. They had heard me for sure. That uneasy feeling in my stomach grew stronger now, and I had no idea why. The likeness of my sister and mother was there, so it wasn't like it was a stranger or something. Then I noticed something very off. They were wearing a knee-length, blue and orange striped nightgown. Their height wasn't short, but it wasn't tall either. It was average. They had a muscular build but could not be called skinny either. The hair was the same color as both my sister and mother, and so was the skin color. My heart skipped and I thought, who the hell is this? Maybe someone stayed overnight? But how could they have? I laid right beside the front door all night. When they turned around and went to inspect another photograph on a wall near the staircase, their face made my heart sink. It was a hybrid of my mother and sister. It was a hybrid of my mother and sister's most discernible features, with glasses that were round on the bottom but squared on the top. Their eyes were not my mother's or my sister's. They were very wide and unnerving, and darted all around the walls very quickly, very excitedly. It was as if my mother and sister had been Frankenstein together into one person. My knee-jerk reaction after seeing their face was to scooch my legs in and pretend I was sleeping. I could feel the veins in my neck beating very hard, and my breathing became very loud and labored. Whoever the hell it was came down the stairs and looked around the living room with the same excitement. I don't know how to explain how scared I was. It came closer to me. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet it would pass by me. I was also scratching and pinching myself now, in case I was asleep without realizing it. The pain was very real. I was wide awake. The thing, I watched with my eyes squinted, took up an interest in a photo album I had left on the table, very close to me. Then, probably the worst thing that could have happened. My sister's portable phone rang. My sister had answered a call last night and had put the phone on the couch frame between the wall and its cushions. The thing's face became very alarmed, and it turned in my direction and saw me and became very, very angry. I opened my eyes and looked at her in her face and just stared back, with my entire body trembling. Its eyes were pure black, total darkness like two huge pupils staring right at me and furious. It opened its mouth unnaturally wide and screamed, "No!" at me, then turned and darted down the stairs to the basement where I heard a door slam shut, and it kept yelling, "No! No! No! No!" I stared at the archway for a long time, still shaking and digging my nails into my arm, begging to wake up because I was so afraid it would come back, wishing I was just dreaming. I literally could not move because I was too scared to get up in case it came back or was waiting at the arch, and I could not speak for some reason. My brain abandoned me. An hour must have passed like that. I did not move. It had stopped yelling, and this was for some reason even scarier than when it had been yelling, because at least then I was sure it was downstairs and not slowly climbing back up the stairs to fillet me alive. I heard a door open again from the hallway upstairs and stared at it, full of adrenaline at this point. It was my mom. Exactly herself, and in the right nightgown. She was humming as she put on the coffee maker and started making toast. Another door opened, my sister this time, fully as she had looked before heading off to bed. She and my mom talked for a bit and I just stared at them. My sister eventually saw me staring at her over the banister and yelled, "What the hell? Why are you just staring at me? Why didn't you say something?" I replied back in a very shaky voice, "I did. Twice." They looked at each other as if to say, "Huh?" and I told my mom I hadn't slept yet, and she said that was a big mistake. I ate my breakfast with them, and then realized eventually I was awake, and I had really not slept at any point that night. I decided against my better judgment to tell them what had just happened. I decided against my judgment to tell them what had just happened, in case it came upstairs to hurt them. They pretty much laughed at me and told me I had just fallen asleep and imagined it, told me I was nuts. My sister told me to go to sleep with my nephew and asked me to try and fix the screen in her room as it had somehow fallen out of the window onto the floor in the night. On my way to her room, I walked by the table in the dining room and noticed all of the frames were moved and in different places than last night. I pointed this out very excitedly like, see? And my sister just shrugged it off and said her son liked looking at them. I kept pressing the issue, so my sister went to the basement in every room to make me shut up about it. She didn't see anything unusual. I laid in the bed and did not sleep a wink. I still think about it from time to time, and I did not ever sleep on that couch again, opting instead to sleep on the floor of the room my parents were in and locking the door. I have been questioning reality since.